What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new to the channel, we'll be continuing part 2 of my dad's journey with cancer. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, we'll put the link up in the description. But guys, we want to ask that you please subscribe before we move on, and please smash that like button because YouTube loves it. Just to do a quick recap, my dad was diagnosed in 2011 with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and in part 1 we just shared a little bit about what he went through, and we're not going to give too much, but if you haven't seen it, please check the link in the description. And today we're going to talk about how the cancer actually came back. I know some of you may know that it did come back, and it was a shock, it was a surprise to us. We're just gonna share that experience with you. Okay, so we're gonna dive right into it. So, Mom, I believe you were the one who noticed that the cancer came back again, because in the first part she did she did notice that it came. She has an eye for those things. So what did you notice this time round?
Well, I noticed in June his both ankles started to be swollen. And I asked him, why are your ankles swollen? He said it's because it was hot. But I recall the temperature was only 7 degrees. When we go to Trinidad and it's hot, his feet usually swell. But this time it was not that intense heat for his feet to be swollen. But prior to that, some months before, I noticed his abdomen was distended. And I asked him to...
So what does that, sorry, so for those who may not know, because I don't know what distended means.
Oh, so it was enlarged, a bit bigger than normal.
Okay.
Right, and I told him to try to suck in your tummy and see if that will work. And he couldn't. Because I know some of us have distended abdomens and we can pull it in and it will withdraw. But it couldn't. So I was a bit concerned there. And when I saw his legs, I said, I think we need to go to see our family doctor. And he said, okay, but he didn't think anything serious about it, to be honest. So we did go. Okay.
And so we've moved from the UK, we're now in Canada. So this is the journey in Canada. And so Dad, talk a little bit about what was it like for us when we just moved? Because I think it may be good to know what were some of the contributing factors to it coming back.
It just sends my mind right back to my experience. We moved here in August of 2012 to Canada. I encouraged Bev for us to move for a better lifestyle.
So what had happened when we moved?
When we moved here, I couldn't get a job. It was very difficult. Trying to find a job, it took me over 1.5 years before I got a job. And it wasn't even in the area that I was qualified. I think what made the circumstances worse as well is the fact that I had to do an exam, an RN exam, a nursing exams, and you're only allowed to do it 3 times. On the 3 occasions, I failed it. So that added stress. This was the first time in my life where I didn't have a job. I couldn't work to provide for my family, and that brought in a whole new dimension to my stress.
So Mom, after you noticed the swelling, what was the next step? How did you feel, and what did you guys do at that point?
Okay, well, I felt a bit concerned because knowing his diagnosis previously. So he made an appointment to the doctors, and the doctor saw him, gave him a referral to get an abdominal and a pelvic ultrasound, which he did get. And that's when he was able to see that the cancer came back.
Wow, so how did that feel, getting that news? After going through what you already went through, thinking that it's over with now, it's back.
sometimes you have a gut feeling that things aren't right. I strongly believe that the cancer hadn't gone fully. Prior to Bev's noticing that my stomach was distended and my feet swollen, I was having some abdominal cramps, and I didn't mention it to her.
So what? Husbands and wives, let's keep the open communication. What? Okay. We won't delve too much into the why.
I knew that things weren't right, but again, I was apprehensive and fearful of, first of all, mentioning to Bev what was happening, and two, I knew what she would have suggested. She's very intuitive, and I just couldn't go back to where I was previously, following my first diagnosis. This felt very traumatic, and I felt just having to face another diagnosis like this again would have added a whole lot more stress to me, and I'm not sure if I could have dealt with it from this point onwards.
Okay, so you went, you had a gut feeling that something was wrong.
Yeah.
You went to the family doctor. You now get the diagnosis. What's the next step there?
He was then referred to the oncologist and started seeing the oncologist. But prior to that, he was at home, and the tumor seemed to have been growing because he was in extreme pain. Night after night, he could not have a good sleep because of the intense pain. And eventually I said, we've got to check this out. Why are you having all that pain? His legs started swelling. He was vomiting. And then I said, okay, let's go to the hospital that I work at. So we went, and with a little pushing because he didn't want to go. And they realized they had to put some tubes in his kidneys because the tumor was so large, it was pressing against his ureters, which is the fluid that brings the urine from the kidney to the bladder. The tube that brings the fluid from the kidney to the bladder. That tube was being pressed. So the fluid was backing up in his kidney. So his kidneys were enlarged. And of course, he was passing less urine, and he had these tubes placed in the back so that at least his urine could come through and reduce the pressure on the kidneys.
Okay, so you mentioned that, the tumors were pressing against his kidneys.
His ureters.
And they had to get
Nephrostomy tubes.
Okay, let's do that.
The tubes in the kidneys.
And they had to get the tubes put into the kidneys. Now, just so people have an understanding, how big were the tumors?
Just to clarify that, I had two tests done, one on the ultrasound and the CT scan. So the CT scan was more definitive. It measured 18 by 12 centimeters, and some parts of the tumor, they couldn't see the borders. So it appears as though that it was larger than that.
Well, that's large. It's pretty large to be inside of you as well.
Yeah, very large. So just to give you an idea, it was pressing against my stomach, pressing against the vena cava, the inferior vena cava, which causes swelling of the legs. So that prevented the blood flow from the legs to come back up to the go back up to the heart.
So that's why they were swelling.
That's why they were swelling.
Wow. So you were in so much pain that you had to get the tubes put in. Did it give you some relief?
A lot of relief.
Okay.
A lot. When the tubes were put in, actually all the pain was gone.
Wow. Just like that. Okay. So Mom, we know at some point Dad was admitted to hospital. What led to that point?
Of course, he was vomiting. He lost a lot of weight. Although his legs were swollen, his face was very, very drawn in. He was emaciated. So he looked, with all due respects, he looked like death. I said, we have to go to the hospital because I don't want anything to happen to you at home. You're not eating, you're not drinking, you're vomiting. Anything can happen. So we went into the hospital and he was admitted.
So yeah, after, Mom said she was going to the hospital, I knew that it must have been really bad for them to be taking him to the hospital. So I was at work at this point. I just, spoke to whoever I needed to. I left, picked up Kiva I went straight to the hospital. I think I let Kiva know. She met me at the hospital. But when I saw him at the hospital as well, it was like, I had never seen Dad at that stage. Even when he was diagnosed the first time, he never looked to me the way he did that day. So, a few friends came that day as well, just to see him. And we're thankful a lot for the support, of our friends. It made a difference. It really made a difference. But, at that point, we knew that it was time to pray. And not just pray, we were praying for a miracle. We had to be specific with our prayers. What did the doctor say? I remember her coming in. And guys, this also is a disclaimer. This is what Dad chose to do, and this was his experience. We're not saying that anyone should take chemo or not take chemo or do this or that. This is just what he did. So you had decided to do chemo at this point?
Yeah. I didn't have a choice. We couldn't figure out what we believe strongly in natural therapies. But at this point in time, the tumor was so large, the natural therapies would have taken a lot longer than we expected. So because the tumor was pressing severely on the inferior vena cava, the oncologist mentioned that, listen, you may in the process lose your lower limbs if I didn't have the chemotherapy. It was dire. And in addition to that, the tumor was also pressing against my bowels, as well as it had covered the liver, 75% of the liver.
Wow.
She wanted to speed up, to reduce the tumor as fast as possible. So I struggled with it, but I realized this was a life and death matter.
Right.
I didn't have a choice here. So after much conversations with Bev, and by that time my sister, Charlene, had joined us at that point in time, I discussed, she's also a nurse with a lot of experience. I discussed it thoroughly with them, and they all agreed that I should do the chemotherapy. And there I started my journey on my chemo.
Okay, so you had decided to do the chemo. We forgot to touch on this, but what were you doing whilst doing the chemo? Were you doing chemo alone? Did you add some natural treatment?
Of course. We continued our natural treatment, which was the juices, the vegetable juices. He continued on his different vitamins. He had his exercises because he couldn't exercise per se because his legs were so swollen. So he would go on the rebounder and just bounce a little bit to get the fluid moving. He continued on his herbal therapies as well. So he was continuing the natural therapy in combination with the chemotherapy. They told him he needed 6 sessions. He took 4 sessions of the chemotherapy and stopped because he didn't like how he was feeling with the chemotherapy. It's a good thing though he wasn't vomiting, but he had 4 sessions of the chemotherapy, but he continued throughout the chemotherapy with all the natural things that we were doing.
Right. Okay, so you decided to do the chemo. So now you had to stay in the hospital.
Yeah.
For a few days.
Yeah.
So you were admitted on Friday? And now it's Saturday. Walk us through what happened on Saturday now.
It was Sabbath, and we usually go to church. So this time we were at the hospital. We spoke to a lot of our friends via telephone. A lot of people were praying for us. And a lot of friends visited. If it's one thing, we have very good friends that are very supportive. And my family, of course, my sister-in-law was down here. So we gathered together, we sang some songs, we started to pray together and discussed the Bible together. Ironically, all 3 of us, me, my friend who came to visit, and Kiva and Adriel, had the same Bible verse on that morning. We hadn't spoken to each other until we got there. We realized all of us had contemplated on that same Bible verse that morning.
And that verse was 2 Chronicles 20. So we were all read 2 Chronicles 20, and it basically, in summary, talks about Jehoshaphat, who was the king of Judah at the time, and some enemies were coming against them. And they came to God in prayer, humble, wholeheartedly, before God, because they had no other way to turn. And basically, in the end, before the battle was even won, they were told, by God through a prophet to praise. The battle's already won. The battle's not yours, it's the Lord's. And that resonated with everyone there. We started, it was like our minds shifted. It was like the victory was already won. Mm-hmm. It's a strange, even talking about it now, it feels strange explaining it to you. It's like, I can't explain it. But there was a piece that came about, and it was like a sign. 3 people reading the same chapter at the same time. It's not coincidence, right? So from that point, more of our friends came, pastors, the elders came, and they prayed, anointed him with oil. And we just knew that everyone was praying. And, God hears and he answers prayers. He wasn't healed that night, but we knew that was the beginning. It was the beginning of healing. Okay, so whilst you were in the hospital, what was going through your mind?
It felt as though like I was in another dream world. Very difficult to perceive. Trying not to focus on the size of the tumor, because that was all I was going through my mind, because I could have literally felt it. Knowing that something is there and it's that large, I just became really, really fearful. Fear just dominated my entire thoughts, day and night. I felt really and truly this was it. I don't think I was going to recover from it.
I don't think I've actually heard him say it like that. I didn't know that was going through your mind, that you thought that was it. Although we saw it, I think we saw it in your face, we still had hope, that it was going to turn out for the better in a strange way,
I mean, the hope came.
Mm-hmm.
The hope came that evening, because at the back of my mind, I was still holding on to hope.
Right.
I still wanted to live, and for me, I was going to do anything possible just to live. I was determined, fearful but determined. And I think that evening, that day in hospital, with everyone speaking, that gave me focus, helped me to refocus my thoughts.
Yeah.
It didn't take away all my fears.
Yeah.
But it gave me perspective now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important as well to highlight the church community. It's something that's overlooked, so often, but there's something about people coming together in unity, in prayer. There's something about that. I know the Bible says where 2 or 3 are gathered, God's in the midst, and that's just exciting to me. Like, God's word is so exciting, it's so powerful. And, that's a living witness. As you can see, he doesn't look anything like he did in those pictures, which is a blessing. God is still working. And we just want to encourage, before we conclude, if there's anyone who may have experienced loss, who may be wondering, why didn't their situation turn out like this, I just want to encourage you. Sometimes we're asking for healing, but God may want to do a resurrection. We just wanted to touch on, while we were praying for my dad, my Sokiva's aunt was also sick. She had colon cancer and she wasn't doing well. And unfortunately, she didn't make it. She did pass away. So, sometimes the question came to our mind, why heal one person but not the other? But death is something we will be touching on in another video. We have to trust God and believe that death is not the end. So I know some of us may have family or friends that may be going through this difficult journey of cancer. I'd say, reach out. It's not easy doing it alone. We couldn't have done it alone without the support of our friends, our family. Even I give Jeff a shout out, who advised us, why don't we do a GoFundMe? and he started the GoFundMe, and Andre, you know, that really helped a lot financially, because, you know, with mom working alone and having to get all these herbs and these natural treatments, it's not cheap. So, you know, reach out, be there for people, be a community. That's what we're here for. And especially as Christians, we are to bear one another's burdens. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have been blessed and have been encouraged. As we said before, if you know anyone who's going through this, please feel free to share. Hopefully it will be an encouragement to them. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and make sure to smash the like button. When you click that like button, the YouTube algorithm pushes it forward and it can reach more people. Okay, so we will see you on the next video. Of course, before we leave, I always have to remind you that you are blessed and highly favored. See you on the next one.